Ronald Reagan once said that the 9 most terrifying words in the English language are, "I'm from the government and I'm here to help." New York City Mayor-elect Zohran Mamdani doesn't agree. Who's right? Welcome to Sharpening Arrows, where we train teens to think biblically about life and politics. I'm your host, Victor Jakes. Very excited to have my daughter, Cindy, producing the show today. So once again, any mistakes, they're not my fault. I have someone to blame this time, but I am so appreciative of her help. We are also on YouTube, youtube.com/@sharpening-arrows, youtube.com/@sharpening-arrows. I'm going to be honest, chances of a child popping in the shot, quite high today. So if that is your idea of a good time, it'll be on YouTube. This show is designed to help teenagers think critically about the issues that are out there in the world. And I encourage parents to listen to this show with your teenagers and then discuss the things that we talk about. The world is sending any series of negative, destructive messages, and we must train our teens. We must sharpen those arrows before we send them out into the world. I only got out one show last week. I apologize for that. Should be back on track this week. And what a week it was last week, at least if you were a Democrat. They won some significant election victories in Virginia and New Jersey. But the headline was in New York City, where Open Socialist Zohran Mamdani won the New York City mayor's race. And we've talked about socialism on several episodes, but he said something in his victory speech that I think is worth examining in depth. Here's his quote. "We will prove that there is no problem too large for the government to solve and no concern too small for it to care about." Okay, now we're going to jump into that quote, but I just want to emphasize again that this podcast is different. I encourage parents, I encourage you to actually stop the podcast and discuss our parental pause point questions with your teenager. Teenagers, you have to think through these issues because there are people who disagree, and it's a mistake to believe that the other side is ignorant or the other side is evil or they're just dumb. They have reasons for believing things like that quote. That man just received over 1 million votes in New York City. He's going to be the mayor of the largest largest city in the country. And we need to understand what's going on in a statement like that. So let's say it one more time, and then I'll give you our first pause point. This is Mamdani's quote. "We will prove that there is no problem too large for government to solve and no concern too small for it to care about." What do you think about Mamdani's statement? All right, as always on this podcast, we're going to start with arguments for the side that I personally disagree with, and then we will refute those arguments and talk about the correct side. So in response to that statement, argument number 1, well, it's good for government to solve problems. Duh. Don't you want your problems fixed? If someone comes up to you on the street and says, "Hey, I can fix your problems," is anyone going to say, "No, that's okay. They're my problems. I like my problems. I'm kind of keeping them, nurturing them. I'm growing them in a garden. They're real pretty." No, of course not. We all want someone to come in and fix our problems. This is especially important when the problems are causing people to suffer. Think about the police. They don't just respond to 911 calls. If they see a crime in progress, they go and stop the crime. This is what the government is supposed to do. Improve people's lives. Help them on their pursuit of happiness. All right, let's have a pause point. What is a problem in your life that you'd like fixed? Say it out right now, and we're going to put a pin in it and come back to that in just a little bit. All right, argument number 2 in favor of Mamdani's statement. Remember, his statement is this: "We will prove that there is no problem too large for government to solve and no concern too small for it to care about. Argument number 2. People are hurting, and the free market has failed. I want you to think about the young adults in New York City who've moved there to build their lives and careers. The rental site Zumper says the monthly rent for a 2-bedroom apartment is more than $5,000. That's per month, not per year. Even if you have a roommate, or 2, or 3, that's a lot of money. And many college graduates have another major bill. In 2023, almost half of those with a bachelor's degree had at least $25,000 in student loan debt. Now, if you had an advanced degree and you combined the loans you had from that degree and with your bachelor's, those borrowers had almost $90,000 in student loan debt. $90,000. That used to buy you a house. And then you look at the personal lives of those in New York City. Popular culture tells young adults to find fulfillment in their careers, not marriage. Casual sex has replaced committed relationships. Of New York City's 3.4 million households, only 34% include a married couple. And many young women view children as an anchor on their financial mobility. Put this all together. You have a city full of strivers who followed society's roadmap. Go to college and then prioritize career, not family. Instead of wealth, they're working hard to barely scrape by. Amid soaring housing prices, the possibility of one day buying a home feels out of reach. And their reward for avoiding marriage and children is loneliness, not glamour. Now, these college graduates weren't the only group in Mamdani's coalition, but they were a vital one. A CNN exit poll found Mamdani beat Andrew Cuomo among those with a bachelor's degree or higher by nearly 20 percentage points. Those are real problems, and they need someone to come in and fix them. All right, so let's have another pause point. Is the free market responsible for those problems? The problems I would say are the lack of value in their higher education degrees, an inability to afford rent or home ownership, and then a lack of building a family and getting married. And as you consider that, let me tell you about Mama Bear Prayers, a podcast for moms who are knee-deep in dishes and training their teens. Whether you are in the carpool lane or the coffee line, host Charity Rios wants to come alongside you and help you grow deeper in your relationship with Jesus. Now, as every parent knows, raising kids can feel a bit like a ping pong game. You bounce from moments of joy to moments of deepest concern. Combine that with the busyness of life, and this back and forth can leave even the most enthusiastic parent overwhelmed and even isolated. As the mom of 4 very busy boys, Charity knows this firsthand, and it's why Mama Bear Prayers exist, to support moms who are on the journey of raising kids. God works through prayer, so check out Mama Bear Prayers today. All right, so let's respond to those arguments. Remember, the first argument is that government should solve problems. That's what the government is there for. Okay, and let's acknowledge, first of all, that there are some problems the government is supposed to solve. We have government for a reason. The government's job is to protect life, liberty, and property. And life and liberty, property, so if the policeman is driving down the street and they see someone committing a crime, yes, they are supposed to solve that problem. So government does have a role. Remember, there's more than 2 options here. Oftentimes what the left will say is, we need government to solve all the problems. And if you oppose that, you don't want government to solve any problems. No, there's a third way, and that's the government should solve certain problems, the problems that it's appropriate for the government to solve. So let's have a pause point. Go back to that problem that you said you wanted solved. What would it take for the government to solve it? Now, obviously, I don't know what problem you selected, but I want you to think about a big picture policy problem that some people might say. Free healthcare. Healthcare is too expensive. We want the government to solve it by making it free. Okay, well, where does the government get its money from? It doesn't just have a magical money tree. Well, in a way, it sort of does with the printing press. But the problem is when the government either takes money through taxes, takes it from someone, doesn't just have it, or if the government prints money from the magical money tree, then everyone's value, the value of everyone's dollar, decreases because of inflation. And usually the left will respond to this as, well, we just want to tax the rich. We just want to tax the 1%. Okay. Well, what if the person who's a little poorer than you says, for the free stuff that I want the government to take your money? It doesn't feel so good when the government's doing the taking from you, does it? And then the second issue here is control. Again, I don't know what problem it was that you wanted the government to solve, but if it doesn't involve money, it's going to involve control. Do you want the government controlling your behavior? As a parent, I exert enormous control over my children who are very young. And the reason is I don't want them to die. Quite literally. Why do I grab my daughter before she runs into the road? Because I don't want her to die. But your goal as a parent, and teens, I know you may not believe this, but this is true. But your goal as a parent, my goal as a parent, my goal for my executive producer daughter here is not that I control her behavior all the time. In fact, I want to train her to be able to see and think about issues and make wise decisions. And so if we say that there's no concern too small for the government, what we're really saying is the government should come in and control your behavior. If the government is big enough to solve every problem, you will have no freedom, because to quote unquote solve those problems, the government's going to have to control almost everything. All right, let's get to the second argument, which is the concerns that young New Yorkers have. And I think, again, we have to acknowledge this. It is a real concern that many college degrees are worthless or worth a lot less than they were 30 years ago. And that those students have high amounts of debt, that housing prices are crazy. $5,000 a month? That's crazy. I don't know how else to say it. That young people are foregoing marriage and families. That's a disaster. Okay, so we can agree on the problem. Now let's ask this. What caused those problems? This is kind of a spin-off on question one of the grade 8. Instead of asking what happens next, let's ask what happened before. Does New York City have these problems because it's been governed by Republicans? Ron DeSantis Light has been running New York City? No, just the opposite. These are areas where the left has dominated. Start with college. Public schools, government-funded schools, push too many students toward college where they learn too little about what matters. Instead of economics, they learn about oppression. Instead of Aristotle, they learn to hate America. Instead of critical thinking, they learn about critical race theory. And many universities are government-run. Almost every university relies on government student loans. I'm proud to say my alma mater, Hillsdale College, is a notable exception. But what we've seen is that this free money from the government, these guaranteed loans, has only made college more expensive. So if you're concerned about high college costs, and you should be looking and saying, wait, the government caused the problem. Giving them more control isn't the solution. Look at housing cost. The Big Apple hasn't embraced free market policies to bring down prices. Just the opposite. It's had rent control for decades. Don't expect a surge in construction if Mamdani freezes rents and raises corporate taxes. But building more housing is the best way to reduce rents. Look at people who aren't getting married, who aren't having children. They haven't embraced conservative social policy. Just the opposite. They've bought into the left's lies that you should prioritize your career over your family. And so what do we have here? We have a series of problems that government has created by overstepping its bounds or the left's cultural influence. You don't solve those problems with more government. The problems were caused by government. So if the problems were caused by government, we need to pull back from the government. We need to return to the free market in order to solve them. All right, so let's get to some arguments for the correct side, which is to reject Mamdani's statement. And once again, let's recap it here. Mamdani said, "We will prove that there is no problem too large for government to solve and no concern too small for it to care about." All right, let's have a pause point. Which of the great 8 apply here? Which of the great 8 would you use to respond to this statement? And as a reminder, the great 8 are 1, what happens next? 2, has this been tried before? 3, is there a principle involved? 4, what are the trade-offs? 5, what do you mean by that? 6, is this an appeal to emotion or logic? 7, am I focused on the speaker or the argument? And 8, what does the Bible say? Now, you could pick almost any of these questions and apply them here. So if you picked one and it's not the one I picked, you didn't get a wrong answer, just different ways to approach it. Here's where I would start. Number 1, is there a principle involved? And this is question 3. All right, so let's talk about a little bit of political theory here. There's this idea of negative rights versus positive rights. Now, negative rights sound bad because the word negative is there, but if someone tests you for cancer and the results come back negative, that's a very good thing, right? So we have to understand that just because it's negative rights doesn't mean it's a negative thing. But negative rights is the idea that the government keeps someone else from violating your rights. So it's not that you have a right to something from someone else, but you have the right for them not to interfere with you and your activity. So if you want to start a business, that's fine. The government protects your right to start a business, but the government doesn't make someone purchase from you. That would be the idea of negative rights. You aren't allowed to kill someone, and other people aren't allowed to kill you. But what we often have today is people pushing positive rights, and certainly Mamdani falls into this category. A positive right is the idea that the government actually has to provide something for you that comes from somewhere else. So instead of just providing you the freedom to do what you want to do, we go back to healthcare. Well, healthcare doesn't just exist. There's no magical healthcare tree. If the government is paying for healthcare, it's taking the money from somewhere, either from your fellow citizens or it's taking it from everyone's pockets by printing currency and increasing inflation. The doctors have to provide the service. And so the government is taking away the freedom that a doctor has to say, I want to serve this patient or this patient, and saying, you must serve these patients. Oftentimes, you must serve them for this price. So again, there's a major principle involved here, because what the Constitution sets up, the idea of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that's an example of these negative rights, where the government keeps someone else from violating your ability to do stuff, and at the same time, you can't go and violate the rights of someone else. But what we have today, especially from the left, is this idea of positive rights, that the government must provide something, but it sounds nice, but the something has to come from somewhere. And so even though there's the word negative there, negative rights are a much better way to structure society, and what there's a conflict between Mamdani's quote and the rights that the government is supposed to protect. All right, point number 2. Let's talk about question 1 of the grade 8. What happens next? What happens if Mamdani is able to prove, or to try to prove, there's no problem too large for the government to solve? Well, that is going to require a lot of money. And New York City can't just print money like the federal government can, and so it's going to need to raise taxes, billions and billions of dollars in taxes. Okay, so say Mamdani is able to raise those taxes. What happens next? Well, If someone starts taking more of your money, you're more likely to leave. And we already see evidence of this. This is from the Hudson Valley Post. According to a survey from JL Partners, about 765,000 New Yorkers, roughly 9% of the population, say they will, quote, definitely, end quote, leave if Mamdani is New York City's mayor. This was taken before the election. That's like the entire population of Washington, D.C. or Seattle disappearing overnight. And another quarter of New York City's population say they are seriously considering moving. So it's fine to say, oh, we're going to raise taxes. But then you have to remember that the people who pay the vast majority of those taxes also get a vote. They can leave. And this is especially concerning because of how skewed or progressive, you might say, New York City's tax system is. In New York City, the top 2% of tax filers pay over half of the city's income taxes. Okay, I want to say that again. The top 2% of tax filers pay over half of the city's income taxes. So if you drive off the rich people, oh, we're going to tax the rich, we're going to tax the rich, and the rich people leave, well, guess who they're going to start taxing to pay for all of this free stuff? The people who were not quite as rich as the people who left. And we can kind of break this down a little further. And this is for the whole state of New York, not just for New York City, but it kind of gives you a scope, a sense of things. This is from Syracuse.com, looking at 2023 tax returns, again, for the whole state of New York. But I just want you to get a sense of how important the top taxpayers are in the income tax system. All right, so there were about 11.6, 11.7 million tax filers in the whole state of New York. If you were in the bottom 50% of filers, on net, you paid a negative amount of taxes because of tax credits or tax rebates. Okay, that's kind of amazing. Oh, excuse me, I apologize. They actually, the lower 50% paid 0.2%. 0.2%. So if you were in the bottom half of tax filers, you paid 0.2%. If you were in the bottom quarter of tax filers, then you actually paid a negative 2.3%. Okay, so that means the top 50% are paying almost the entire amount of income taxes. All right, well, let's just talk about the top 200,000 taxpayers. That's about 2% of taxpayers. They are paying 50% of the total taxes. Whoa. All right, then we talk about the top 0.8%. They are paying 41% of the total taxes. And then we talk about the top 200 taxpayers out of 11.7 million, 0.002%. They paid 6.3% of total income taxes in New York. So just 50 of those people leaving would put a major hit in the amount of taxes that New York would collect. All right, so let's have a pause point. Do you think taxes make millionaires move? Or do you think high taxes contribute to millionaires moving? All right, let's go to point number 3. Question 2. Has this been tried before? Has any government ever tried this before? Have they ever thought, oh, we'll just have the government do it? Has anyone ever thought about this? Yes. Time and time and time again throughout history. But socialism fails. It's why socialist countries run out of money and toilet paper. I'm not going to belabor this point because I covered it a whole lot in episode 42. I really encourage you to go back and look at that. Look at how Venezuela went from one of the richest countries in the world with massive oil reserves to literally running out of toilet paper, telling its visitors to bring toilet paper. Socialism doesn't work. The government can say it will solve your problems, but there is a century of evidence that the government isn't capable of doing so. All right, and then the fourth response here is question 8. What does the Bible say? Now, I will grant you that the Bible does not say something specifically about this quote, but think about what's at stake in this quote. I want you to listen to this. We will prove that there is no problem too large for government to solve and no concern too small for it to care about. That's all encompassing. That's saying cast your cares upon government. Oh, you have a concern? The government will be there for you. But we are to rely on God, not the government, to solve problems. In fact, this quote reminds me of Luke 4 when Jesus is being tempted by the devil. The devil led him, Jesus, up to a high place and showed him in an instant all the kingdoms of the world. And the devil said to Jesus, I will give you all their authority and splendor. It has been given to me, and I can give it to anyone I want to. If you worship me, it will all be yours. Jesus answered, it is written, worship the Lord your God and serve him only. And I would encourage you to think about the principle, to think about the sentiment in that statement. Are people who are following Mamdani, are they relying on God to solve their problems? Or are they turning to the government as a genie to rub the bottle? Oh, the genie comes out. Solve my problems, government. Solve them. You're here. There's nothing too big or too small for you to care about. No, that's the role of God. We are to turn to God with all of our concerns. Nothing is too big for him. Nothing is too small for him, but not the government. If you enjoyed this podcast, please subscribe on YouTube, youtube.com/@sharpeningarrows, or leave us a 5-star review. Thank you so much to my executive producer, Cindy. Be courageous like Charlie, stay sharp, and give God the glory. I'll see you next time.